The night before I was supposed to fly to Germany for my own mother's funeral, my wife fed my passport into our paper shredder. When I found the pile of confetti that was once my federal ID, she just smirked and said, "Oops." I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "Accidents happen." What she didn't know was that our kitchen security camera had recorded the entire deliberate act, and that accident was about to land her in federal detention, ensuring she'd miss her own mother's milestone birthday party. The call came at 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, a day that had, until that moment, been oppressively ordinary. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm coffee and staring blankly at a spreadsheet on my laptop. The world outside was a placid suburban painting, but inside, a quiet storm had been brewing for 2 long years. My mother, my stoic, fiercely loving mother, had been fighting lung cancer at her home in Germany, and every ring of the phone from an international number sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. This time, the caller ID showed my sister's name, Lissel. My wife, Greta, was sitting across from me, scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving in a relentless, rhythmic flick. She glanced up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes at the interruption, before her expression softened into a practiced look of concern. I answered, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Lissel's voice was a shattered whisper on the other end, the 3 words I'd been dreading for months finally breaking through the static of the transatlantic line. "She's gone, Marcus." The world tilted. The spreadsheet blurred into a meaningless grid of numbers. The ticking of the clock on the wall became a deafening drumbeat, marking the seconds of a world that no longer contained my mother. Greta was next to me instantly, her hand on my back, a perfect portrait of a supportive wife. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. Lissel and I stumbled through the necessary logistics in a haze of grief. The funeral was to be on Friday. It was already Wednesday. I had to move, and I had to move now. While Lissel's sobs echoed in my ear, I was already on my laptop, my fingers fumbling over the keyboard. A last-minute, one-way ticket to Hamburg. The price was astronomical, an eye-watering $2,800, but the number was as meaningless as the spreadsheet. My mother only dies once. I clicked confirm without a second thought. Greta was a whirlwind of efficiency. "I'll help you pack," she said, her voice soft and resolute. She pulled my large suitcase from the top of the closet, laying it open on our bed. She folded my shirts with a precision I could never manage, her movements crisp and purposeful. For a few hours, she was the rock I needed, the calm in my personal hurricane of sorrow. But as the evening deepened and the reality of my imminent departure settled over the house, a chill crept into the air. Greta grew quiet, her supportive energy replaced by a sullen silence that felt heavier than my grief. I was carefully folding my one good suit, the one I'd worn to our wedding, when she finally spoke. "Your mother never liked me," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. The statement hung in the air, a non sequitur of staggering inappropriateness. I paused, the dark wool of the suit jacket clutched in my hands. "Greta, please. Not now. She called me a gold digger at our wedding," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "In front of everyone." She whispered it, but I heard her. She was in the early stages of dementia, and we've been over this 1,000 times, I said, my voice strained with the effort of keeping it level. She didn't even remember saying it an hour later. "I don't think you should go," she said, the words dropping like stones into the quiet room. I stopped packing altogether and turned to face her. "What did you just say?" "Your sister can handle it," she said, crossing her arms. "She's there. You're here. And we have Ingrid's 65th birthday party this weekend. It's a huge deal." Ingrid, her mother, a woman who lived a mere 8 blocks away from us, a woman we saw for dinner at least twice a month, a woman who was, by all accounts, in perfect health. The sheer audacity of the comparison left me speechless. "My mother is dead, Greta, and mine is turning 65. It's a milestone birthday," she insisted, her voice rising with indignation. "I already told everyone you'd be there. I told them you were giving a toast. What am I supposed to say now?" I just stared at her, a chasm opening between us, a vast, unbridgeable canyon of mismatched priorities, and what I was beginning to realize was a profound lack of empathy. I saw her then, not as my partner in life, but as a stranger whose inner world was completely alien to me. "I'm going to my mother's funeral," I said, each word a chip of ice. I turned my back on her, finished packing my bag, and zipped it shut with a definitive, final tug. She stormed out of the room, the slam of the door punctuating her fury. Exhausted and emotionally raw, I placed my passport, my printed boarding pass, and my wallet on the kitchen counter, ready for a swift exit in the morning. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and fell into a restless, dreamless sleep around 11. The alarm blared through the darkness, pulling me from the depths of a merciful oblivion. My flight was at 7 a.m. I moved on autopilot, showering, dressing in the dark, trying not to wake the woman sleeping in our bed. I crept out to the kitchen, the first pale hints of dawn streaking the sky. I reached for my passport. It wasn't there. My heart stuttered. I checked the counter again, my hands patting the cold granite. Nothing. My wallet and boarding pass were there, exactly where I'd left them. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the small home office nook where we kept our paper shredder. The bin was full. A sick, cold dread began to seep into my bones. I walked over and peered inside. There, mixed in with shredded junk mail and old credit card offers, were the unmistakable, confetti-like remains of the dark blue cover and watermark pages of a United States passport. My passport. I looked up. Greta was standing by the coffee machine, a steaming mug in her hands, watching me. She was fully dressed, her makeup perfectly applied. She had been awake for a while. "Where's my passport?" I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, her eyes holding mine over the rim of the mug. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk played at the corners of her lips. "Oops," she said, her voice a parody of innocence. The word hung in the air, a monument to her cruelty. "Oops. I was shredding some old documents late last night," she elaborated, her tone light and breezy. "I must have grabbed it by accident from the counter. Oh, I'm so clumsy sometimes." She wasn't even trying to sell it. The lie was so thin, so transparent, it was an insult to my intelligence. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to know that she had done this, that she had won. I looked from the shredder bin to her smug face, then down at my phone. 4:23 a.m. My flight was in less than 3 hours. There was no way to get a new passport in time. I was trapped. A wave of white-hot rage washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to scream, to break something, to wipe that self-satisfied smirk off her face. But then another feeling, colder and sharper, cut through the anger. It was clarity. In that moment, I understood everything. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage down, packing it away into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I looked at her, my face a mask of weary resignation. "Accidents happen," I said. The smirk on her face faltered. She actually looked surprised, even a little disappointed, that I wasn't screaming, wasn't pleading, wasn't having the meltdown she had so clearly anticipated. "So," she pressed, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "You'll stay for Mom's party then?" "Sure," I said, turning away from her. "Of course." I walked back to our bedroom, my movements measured and calm. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Lissel, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "Can't make it. Passport issue. So sorry." She called immediately, her voice thick with tears, and the sound of her sobbing, so alone and so far away, finally broke something inside me. Our father had died 8 years ago. I was the only immediate family she had left in Germany, and now she would have to bury our mother all by herself. My failure to be there for her was a physical pain, a fresh wound on top of the gaping hole my mother's death had left. But as I listened to my sister's grief, the cold knot of rage in my stomach hardened into something else entirely. It hardened into resolve. See, Greta, in her arrogant and meticulous planning, had forgotten one crucial detail. Last year, after a string of break-ins in our neighborhood, I had installed a Nest security camera in the kitchen. It was mounted discreetly on top of the cabinets, offering a wide, clear view of the entire room. Greta had dismissed it as one of my paranoid tech gadgets. She never used the app, never checked the feed. I was willing to bet she had completely forgotten it even existed. While she hummed happily in the kitchen, I sat on the edge of our bed, opened the Nest app on my phone, and scrolled back through the night's footage. And there it was. At 1:07 a.m., the timestamp glowing in the corner of the screen, the footage showed Greta, cloaked in the grainy black and white of the night vision, creeping into the kitchen. She moved with a slinking, deliberate grace. She walked directly to the counter, picked up my passport, and held it up to her face, looking directly at it. She opened it, her thumb flicking through the pages as if to confirm her target. Then, she turned, walked to the shredder, and began to feed it through, page by agonizing page. The whole process took nearly 3 minutes. She wasn't frantic. She was methodical, a vandal destroying a priceless piece of art. Then came the part that truly chilled me to the bone. After the last page had been devoured by the machine, she pulled the bin out, sifted through the shredded pieces with her fingers as if admiring her handiwork, and then slid the bin back into place. It was premeditated, malicious, and utterly without remorse. I saved the video clip. I uploaded it to my Google Drive. I backed it up to Dropbox. I emailed a copy to my private, password-protected account. I made sure that evidence was indestructible and eternal. Thursday, the day of my mother's funeral, was one of the longest days of my life. I spent it trapped in my own home, a prisoner of my wife's machinations. Greta, on the other hand, was positively radiant. She acted as though a great weight had been lifted, chattering on about the final preparations for Ingrid's party. "Since you're here anyway," she said, her voice bright and cheerful, "you could give me a hand with the decorations." I spent the afternoon blowing up balloons and hanging streamers, a grotesque parody of celebration. Each knot I tied, each piece of tape I pressed to the wall, was a silent monument to my fury. All the while, I pictured my sister, Lissel, standing alone at her mother's graveside, the cold German soil receiving the woman who had given us life. The image fueled the icy fire burning in my gut. On Friday morning, while Greta was at work, I made my move. I called the National Passport Agency and explained that my passport had been destroyed and I needed an emergency replacement. The agent on the phone was sympathetic until I let slip one crucial detail. "It was destroyed deliberately," I said. The line went quiet for a moment. "Sir," she said, her tone shifting from helpful to serious, "a U.S. passport is federal property. Deliberately destroying one is a federal crime." "I know," I said. "I have video proof it was deliberate. You need to file a police report immediately, sir, and contact the State Department." So I did. I drove to the local police station and sat in a hard plastic chair, waiting for my turn. I showed the officer on duty the video on my phone. His expression shifted from weary boredom to rapt attention. "So she did this to prevent you from attending your mother's funeral?" he asked, looking up from the screen. "Yes. And you have her on camera, clear as day, deliberately destroying federal property?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair and whistled softly. "Well, this is above my pay grade. We'll need to contact the federal authorities. This is actually FBI jurisdiction." By Friday afternoon, my quiet suburban life had taken a surreal turn. Two FBI agents, a man and a woman in crisp, dark suits, were sitting on my living room couch. They watched the video in silence, their faces impassive. The male agent, who introduced himself as Agent Kowalski, shook his head slowly when it was over. "In my 15 years with the Bureau," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice, "I have never seen someone film themselves committing a federal crime so clearly, so calmly." They took my statement, collected a copy of the video file, and assured me they would be in touch. Saturday was the day of Ingrid's grand 65th birthday party. I played my role to perfection. I was the perfect doting son-in-law. I smiled for photos, my arm draped around Greta's shoulders. I mingled with her relatives, accepting their condolences for my unfortunate passport mishap with a somber nod. I even gave a toast, raising my glass of champagne and speaking about the profound importance of family, of being there for the ones you love in their most important moments. Greta beamed at me, holding my arm, her eyes shining with pride. She thought she had one. She thought I had chosen her family over mine. Later in the evening, Ingrid pulled me aside, her hand clutching my arm in a surprisingly strong grip. "I'm so glad you prioritized family," she said, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Unlike last year, when you abandoned poor Greta for 3 whole weeks to go look after your sick mother." And there it was, the rotten root from which the poison tree had grown. The apple hadn't fallen far at all. The call from the FBI came on Monday morning. They were moving forward with charges: willful destruction of federal property and interference with international travel through the destruction of documents, among other things I didn't fully comprehend. "When do you plan to arrest her?" I asked, my voice steady. "We find it's best to conduct these arrests at the subject's place of work," Agent Kowalski explained. "It tends to minimize the chances of domestic escalation." On Tuesday at 11 a.m., I was parked in my car across the street from Greta's office building, a modern glass tower that suddenly looked like a cage. I watched the unmarked FBI sedan pull up to the curb. I watched Agent Kowalski and his partner get out and walk calmly through the revolving doors. I waited. 20 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate with the force of a small earthquake. It was a deluge of rage and confusion. Greta's best friend, Astrid. "What did you do?" "They arrested her at her desk." Her sister, Petra. You called the FBI over an accident? You ungrateful piece of filth. And then, finally, a call from a blocked number. It was Greta, using her one phone call from federal detention. You psychotic monster, she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. It was just a piece of paper. You have to get me out of here right now. Can't, I said calmly. It's federal custody. You should probably lawyer up. She started screaming then, a long, incoherent tirade about how I was destroying her life over something petty, how her mother's real birthday was this weekend, and I was ruining everything, how I would pay for this. I hung up the phone and drove home in blissful silence. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. That evening, Ingrid, Greta's mother, showed up at my front door flanked by her two hulking sons, Hans and Eric. They were both well over 6 feet tall, with the thick necks and belligerent expressions of men who thought their size was a substitute for intelligence. You will fix this, Hans snarled, pushing his way past me into my house. Get out of my home, I said, standing my ground. Not until you call the FBI and tell them it was all a misunderstanding, Eric added, taking a menacing step toward me. I had anticipated something like this. My phone was already in my hand, recording video. I'm calling 911 right now, I announced. You have 10 seconds to leave my property before I do. Ingrid lunged at me and snatched the phone from my hand. No police. We are family, she screeched. You raised a woman who committed a felony to stop me from attending my mother's funeral, I shot back. We are not family. With a shriek of rage, she hurled my phone against the far wall, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. There, now you have no proof of anything, she yelled triumphantly. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Lady, I have security cameras covering every inch of this house. You just committed assault and destruction of property on film. Congratulations. The color drained from their faces. They backed away, their bravado evaporating, and left without another word. I called 911 anyway and filed a report. Assault charges were added to the family's growing list of legal troubles. Greta's bail hearing was on Wednesday. It was a short, brutal affair. Citing the nature of her crime, the federal judge deemed her a flight risk and ordered her to be held in detention. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. The prosecutor played my kitchen security video for the court. The judge watched, his face an impassive mask. Mrs. Zimmerman, he said, his voice dripping with contempt, you deliberately destroyed a federal document to maliciously prevent your husband from attending his own mother's funeral. Greta's lawyer, a flustered public defender, tried to spin it. Your Honor, this was a simple marital dispute that has been blown completely out of proportion. The judge was not impressed. Counselor, I can see your client on the screen, verifying it is a passport before methodically feeding it into a shredder. This was premeditated. Bail is denied. In a last-ditch effort, her lawyer requested she be released on compassionate grounds for her mother's 65th birthday celebration that weekend. The judge actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. She prevented her husband from attending his mother's funeral. The answer is no. That's when Greta lost it. She began screaming in the courtroom, calling me a vindictive monster, shrieking that it was just paper and that her mom's birthday was more important than a funeral for a woman who was already dead anyway. The judge calmly added contempt of court charges to her rap sheet. The consequences kept piling up. Greta worked as an HR manager, a job that, hilariously, came with a strict morality clause in her contract. Being arrested by the FBI at your desk for committing a federal crime, it turned out, was a clear violation of that clause. She was fired via a certified letter sent to her at the federal detention center. Ingrid called me, screaming, but I was done with her. Your daughter ruined her own life the moment she turned my passport into confetti, I said, and hung up. Petra, her sister, started a GoFundMe page titled Help Greta Fight Unjust Persecution from Abusive Husband. It raised a grand total of $47 before it was taken down. After a commenter pointed out, wait, the unjust persecution is because she illegally destroyed his passport, so he couldn't go to his mom's funeral? That's messed up. Greta remains in federal detention. Her lawyer's motion for an emergency release on mental health grounds was swiftly denied after the prosecution presented a compilation of my security footage. The FBI's forensic team, in cloning her phone, had uncovered weeks of her secretly taking photos of my credit cards, snooping through my work laptop, and even recording me while I slept. It turned out she had been planning to divorce me for months. The passport incident was a calculated act of punishment because I had refused to immediately sell my mother's house in Germany. She wanted her hands on my inheritance money, and she wanted it now. But the pinnacle of entitlement came from Ingrid. The woman filed a civil lawsuit against me for $50,000 for emotional damages. Her claim? That I had maliciously and with premeditated intent had her daughter arrested right before her milestone birthday party, causing her severe mental anguish and ruining the celebration. My lawyer, a man who had seen everything, could not stop laughing when he called me. She's suing you because her daughter committed a crime and faced the consequences? This is beautiful. We countersued for the assault, the destruction of my phone, and ongoing harassment, using the crystal-clear footage of her attacking me in my own home. From her detention cell, Greta continued to call me daily. Not to apologize, but to issue demands. Put money in my commissary account. Call my work and tell them it was all a big misunderstanding. My cellmate snores. You need to get me transferred. I finally stopped accepting her calls. Her public defender reached out with a plea deal. If I would agree to speak at her sentencing and characterize her actions as a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by marital stress, the prosecution would recommend a minimum sentence, likely just 6 months. Let me think about it, I told him. I thought about it for about 5 seconds. I thought about my sister standing alone in a German cemetery. I thought about my mother, who I never got to say goodbye to. I called him back. No deal. The final act of this tragedy, or perhaps comedy, began when the FBI uncovered the real reason for Greta's sudden desperation for my inheritance money. Buried deep in her phone were months of messages with a man named Dmitri, her meditation instructor. They weren't just meditating. They were having an affair and had been planning to run away to Greece together. That's why she needed the money from my mom's house so urgently. She had already purchased a one-way ticket to Athens using my credit card rewards points. The messages were a portrait of pure, unadulterated greed and narcissism. Once I get the Germany money, we can start a new life, baby, one text read. Just have to keep him stable until his mom finally dies. I'll make sure he can't travel for the funeral. That'll give us more time to transfer the assets. The FBI promptly added fraud and conspiracy charges to her indictment. But the story didn't end there. Dmitri, the meditation guru, was married. His wife, a fiery woman named Eleni, found out about the affair when the FBI contacted her husband as part of their investigation. Eleni called me. "Your wife has been sleeping with my husband," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "And apparently, she destroyed your passport to steal your inheritance so they could run away together." We met for coffee. Eleni came armed with a thick folder of evidence. Receipts for lingerie, hotel rooms, and Brazilian waxes, all charged to my credit cards on days I thought Greta was attending work conferences. Eleni was divorcing Dmitri and, thanks to an archaic law still on the books in our state, was also suing Greta for alienation of affection. Ingrid's frivolous lawsuit against me was thrown out of court. During her deposition, my lawyer had her confirm her belief that her birthday party was more important than my mother's funeral. The judge was so appalled by her testimony and the video of her assaulting me that he not only dismissed her case, but also issued a restraining order against her. Ingrid violated it less than 3 hours later by showing up at my gym to scream at me. She was arrested. Her sons were furious, but my conscience was clear. Her choices were her own. Greta's sentencing was yesterday. She stood before the judge and delivered a rambling, self-pitying speech about how she was the real victim, punished for simply trying to protect our love from my toxic family. The prosecutor then presented one final piece of evidence, a text she had sent to Dmitri on the morning of my mother's funeral. "Mission accomplished," it read. "He's stuck here while they put the old witch in the ground. A few more months and we're free with all his money, baby." The judge sentenced her to 18 months in federal prison, calling her actions callous, premeditated, and showing a complete disregard for both federal law and basic human decency. As they dragged her out of the courtroom, she screamed at me, "I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything." I just looked at her and said, "No. You did it yourself the moment you turned my passport into confetti." The divorce was finalized last week. Thanks to the adultery, fraud, and federal conviction, Greta got nothing. I sold the house we shared and kept my mother's home in Germany, which Lissel and I are now turning into a vacation rental. I've started seeing a wonderful woman named Meredith from my grief support group. She understands loss. She understands that funerals matter. As for the rest of them, Ingrid served 60 days in county jail for her repeated restraining order violations, missing her own birthday, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Dmitri fled to Greece alone, ghosting Greta completely. Her letters from prison are returned, stamped address unknown. The only thing I regret in all of this is not seeing the red flag sooner. But some lessons you have to learn the hard way. My life is quiet now, and for the first time in a long time, it is my own.